Welcome to the Anxious Love Coach podcast, the place to be to create meaningful, conscious, secure, long-term partnerships. Here we talk relationship anxiety and creating healthy dynamics with your partners so that you can experience that secure, loving connection where you both feel committed and confident. My name is Natalie Kennedy and I'm your host. I'm a relationship anxiety coach and meditation teacher. I've had a practice for 9 years working with clients battling anxiety. And after experiencing an extraordinary shift in my own healing relative to relationships, now work to combine my personal experience as well as my training to help others trust themselves within relationship. I've been to the edge and back with my partner for my own relationship anxiety and have come out the other side, feeling consistently blessed and at ease in my partnership. I want to pass the tools I've learned along to you to help you trust yourself in relationships and also create magnetic dynamics with your partner. Our partners are our mirrors designed for our expansion, and the challenges exist generally to wake us up to ourselves, not destroy our beautiful partnerships. I believe most mainstream relationship advice today can be a huge source of anxiety and dissatisfaction. So let's jump in and normalize the challenges that we go through, call out the limitations of today's messages about love without being old-fashioned, and awaken our intuition and wisdom. If you haven't yet, be sure to join our communities over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Anxious Love Coach. You can also request a 30-minute relationship anxiety assessment with either me or my co-coach Sheridan for one-on-ones, or join one of our group programs over on my website at www.anxiouslovecoach.com. I've also got a wonderful relationship anxiety meditation for you as thanks for subscribing to my email list. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. Hello, welcome back to the Anxious Love Coach podcast. This is Natalie. It's wonderful to be back here with you. In today's episode, I'm really excited to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart and life at the moment, and that is on maintaining a sense of separateness while you are in a relationship, especially if you are in a long-term relationship, or if you are married. This is so important because without a sense of separateness, you cannot have a sense of desire. It's really hard to desire your partner if you have merged in the name of cozy love. So in today's episode, I would like to share how this is applying to my life, why it's important to have a sense of separateness, what to do with the difficult emotions that may come up if you decide that you want to create a little bit more individuality between you and your partner or partners in the name of cultivating a little bit more eros, a little bit more desire. As you do that, you might start experiencing some separation anxiety, or you might experience a slightly different flavor of anxiety, which is, I'm getting separateness, but I want actually more. And how do I create separateness without necessarily drifting apart from my partner? Because if you don't have anything to really draw you back in some sense, then you're kind of like two planets without any pull towards one another. And then they kind of, drift apart. So how do we maintain a sense of separateness without drifting apart? These are all topics that are going to be covered in the podcast today. So how is this relating to me? Because I'm selfish and I want to talk about myself first. So Preston and I, if you listen to the last couple episodes, you probably have heard, or if you've been following me on Instagram, or you're in my email list, you might know that Preston and I actually just came back to Medellin, Colombia. We were here last year, made a lot of friends. My co-coach Sheridan lives here, and we came back here after we got married in June, and we just love it here. And one of the advantages and honestly privileges that we have here is our dollar goes a long way. And Preston has never gotten to experience dorm life. When we met, he was in college living with his parents. And I always had roommates, or I lived with my family, or I lived with Preston. I never had my own space. Frankly, I could not afford it in Southern California. So when the time came, we moved in together, and that was that. So we're thinking about having a family in the next couple of years, and we're just thinking about what we would really love to accomplish before that time comes. as we started exploring what our profound, rich lives look like, I do mean financially, but I also mean not necessarily financially, just through the types of experiences, the rich experiences we would like to have in our lives very consciously. One of the desires that came up for me was actually to use this time to find ourselves a little bit more. And I had this little inkling that now would be a good time to propose potentially living apart. Preston had a desire to learn Spanish. There was a hostel nearby that was basically teaching Spanish lessons. As part of the hostel experience, they also gave you salsa lessons, and it was it was very affordable for us. And it just this interesting conversation came up that made us both realize how interesting and how fun and how rebellious it might feel to live apart. And we happened to be on the same page around it. So long story short, Preston moved into his little hostel, and I moved into this cute little studio apartment about 15-minute walk away. So we're still very close. We still see each other regularly, but the difference is we kind of have our own beds. We live in our own spaces, and Preston sometimes comes and spends the night at my apartment. So yes, we have been together for 10 years, and we just got married, and we're kind of dating each other again. It is very cute. Now, I don't necessarily think that is what's necessary for everyone, especially if you've hit like a dry spell in your relationship. But I share this with you to just remind you that you get to design your relationship how you want. And that ultimately, we want to step out of the matrix of what we think our lives have to look like, that we have to necessarily get a college degree, get a job, find a partner, get married, buy a house, have kids, and do all that in a matter of 5 years. And if you're not doing that, you're a total failure. No! Every person is unique. We've all just kind of manifested into 3D human beings so that we can explore what our highest potential could look like. And I use that word kind of cautiously, just because a lot of people get tripped up on the word potential and think that there's one right way to do things. There's not. All the paths lead to the same place. We all die. And while that might bring you anxiety, it also can awaken you. It can enliven you to a sense of mortality, and that there's no wrong path. Two things are true. There's no wrong path, and there are ways to make your life more satisfying, more rich, more fulfilling. And so for us, that has manifested as, for this month, we are deciding to live separately. And who knows, maybe we'll like it so much we'll continue it. I don't imagine that this would be a phenomenal arrangement when we have children, but who knows? All options are on the table. We are thinking potentially about moving here to Colombia. They have a really great digital nomad sort of visa that would be very convenient for us, but we'll see. Nothing is set in stone. So that's our story, and I share that to sort of inform the rest of this podcast, just so that you can understand why this is so important. Because a lot of us are probably wondering, what's the point of being in a long-term relationship if at the end of it all you're just going to live apart? Why? I'm hopeful that through this podcast it'll start to make a little bit more sense. And I have an email that I just sent out to my audience today pulled up here, just so that I can kind of touch on the same points. After I sent out this email, I was so inspired I had to record a podcast. But in essence, when you're navigating a long-term relationship, one of the most important pieces to this relationship dance, and it is a dance, is, believe it or not, maintaining a sense of separateness. Like you two are two separate individuals that happen to be in a relationship. Your identity is not based on boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, and wife. That is not who you are. That is one rather small aspect of who you are. Now, if you're I posted on Instagram saying what questions do you have about separateness? And I got a bunch of responses, and I'm going to pull them up and look through a few of them at the end today. But a lot of people were asking about long distance relationships, and as I've started talking more about separateness and desire in relationships, a lot of people have been kind of really hard. I can tell I've triggered some heartbreak for people who are how dare you speak about creating separateness when I don't have a choice? I have to have separateness because I'm in a long distance relationship. So if you're in a long distance relationship, and we do have an episode on this, by the way, with Sheridan and I, so I recommend scrolling back maybe a year ago and you'll find the long distance episode between my co-coach Sheridan and I. That's another conversation. But what I will say about long distance relationships is that in long distance, the mechanism of separateness is built in for you. And the thing that makes it feel so kind of agonizing is the fact that it seems like you don't really have a choice around it. And maybe you kind of have a choice around it and you kind of don't. It's like one of those two things are true paradoxes at the same time. Like, yes, you could drop everything and go be with them, but then there'd be all sorts of other consequences. So in a way, we're choosing this, but it's a relatively painful choice. And so it feels like you're, it's like, how can you enjoy a sense of separateness when it feels like it wasn't by choice for you to be separate? So I understand the pain around that. It can be agonizing. But I'm hopeful that in listening to this podcast episode, maybe I can shift your perspective a little bit. And you can use your understanding of how separateness is actually a good thing for a relationship. And you can use it to your advantage to build tension, anticipation, and desire, ultimately, right? I was speaking to my friend Chelsea Horton a couple months back, and she was telling me that when she and her partner, now husband, were in a long-distance relationship, it was some of the hottest time in their relationship. And I'm not saying that all long-distance relationships are going to be hot, because if you have too much separateness and not enough closeness, if you haven't cultivated enough of having energy, which I'll explain more later in this podcast, if you don't have enough of that having energy, then you're, like I said, you're two planets that can easily drift apart. So that's why I say it is a dance. Now, before I move on, I want to talk a little bit about the quintessential honeymoon phase. So for many of us, in the beginning of our relationship, there is this sweet spot, and that's why we call it the honeymoon phase. There's a sweet spot of separateness and togetherness that really only uniquely, naturally, not always, but often happens during the honeymoon phase. And Esther Perel actually talks about this in one of her books. I forget if it's Mating in Captivity or if it's in State of Affairs, but she's talked about the thing that makes the honeymoon phase so special is that we're kind of in this sweet spot between the having and the desiring. So what I mean by that is, like, we haven't quite figured each other out completely yet. So we're still intrigued. We're still trying to learn about this other person. But there is a sense of having them, this sense of knowing the other that creates the illusion of having them. So the honeymoon phase allows us to beautifully have a sense of both desiring and loving the other person. So there's still something left to conquer, but you've conquered them enough to where, I use the word conquered very loosely here, I don't mean literally, but there's a sense of having to have gotten to know them. And because of that, you can build love, you can build trust, you can build safety, but there's still enough novelty to where there is still something left to conquer. Now, what I will say is that the idea that you know someone is an illusion, and that it is in part what makes desire stop over the years. But for the sake of keeping this podcast on topic, I will say that yes, there is a very unique space in the honeymoon phase because we have this edge of both having and desiring the other person. And from that place, we continue on the trajectory of wanting to, I'm going to use that word conquer again. We want to conquer them more and more and more. We want to close the gap. We want to close the distance. We want to merge and love them, right? Because when someone is far apart and we intensely desire them, we want to close the gap. We want to basically merge with them. And like I said, the honeymoon phase is that sweet spot where we've kind of got them, but there's still more to conquer, and we continue accelerating in the direction of having and owning and conquering and really knowing the person. So gradually we move more and more into the pleasures of having our partners. We get an idea of who they are, we learn their quirks and their kinks, we grow to accept the things about them that we don't like. Maybe we get married, maybe we move in together, maybe we have kids. again, we are closing and closing and closing the gap of separateness. And like I said, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there is an inherent love that gets created, and it kind of replaces the infatuation as a result of this. So we might start believing that we know our partners and that there isn't much else to know. And with that, we often merge into this routine of cozy love, and inevitably we might fall into a routine of becoming the same way with one another day after day, indefinitely. And again, I really want to reiterate that this is not in and of itself a bad thing, especially if you desire a relationship with a lot of predictability and safety. There is nothing wrong with that. However, what I started understanding many years into my relationship anxiety journey is there is a very real part of me that enjoys separateness and having a really hot sex life and polarity and opposite and individuality. And when I merge with my partner too much and we start getting too cute and we start getting too comfortable and we really just sink into the having of each other and don't stoke the fire by creating separateness and oxygen between us, boom, the eroticism dies. So in the name of re-evoking desire again, it's going to ask us to remember who we are outside of the relationship. And when you start thinking about what that might look like, it means that when you come home, your partner might not be there because they're out with the guys. Or maybe instead of spending time with your partner watching TV, you actually go out pole dancing, or I might go out salsa or tango dancing. Initially, this might actually trigger separation anxiety. And so a lot of us don't want the discomfort of that. We don't want the discomfort of potentially meeting someone sexy and like not knowing what to do with that energy. So we avoid it. But to continue to be an erotic being, an alive being, you need to know who you are. And that means you need to know who you are outside of relationship. This is a critical piece to desiring your partner and wanting them. And I really, really wish I knew this when I was struggling with relationship anxiety, because until I understood this, a huge part of me thought that I had to break up in order to find myself again. And I did not know any in between. It was either stay super comfortable or break up. There wasn't like, hey, I forgot who I was. Why don't I go travel for a month without you? Right? And ultimately, actually, if you remember episode 1 of the Anxious Love Coach podcast, that is exactly what I did. And that traveling was actually what allowed me to figure out who the hell I was, at least for that time being. And it made me so much more confident in my decision. It's like I had to extricate myself from the relationship on a day-to-day basis without necessarily removing the title of being in a committed relationship. This is why when I'm working with my clients and they join me in my programs, we have a retreat coming up, I'm going to tell them the same thing. It's like, when you're here with me in this container, this has less to do with your partner and more to do with you. We're not going to like set you loose to go romp with a bunch of strangers, but we're going to cultivate the mindset of the fact that you're single right now. So if you're going to come to my retreat, for 5 days, you're single. And we do this not as break up with your partner and like when you come back, you're not going to enjoy them. No, this is just, we're practicing a way of thinking. It's like, who would you be? What would you do if you were not defined by the relationship? And initially, this might freak some people out. And I think this is part of why a lot of people get triggered when they read a quote on the internet that says, "Oh, you're only with your partner because you're frightened of being alone." And that leads them to think, "Oh, I need to break up with my partner so that I can be alone and find myself." You don't necessarily need to break up with your partner to find yourself, but you might need to mentally remember who you are outside of the label. I say the label because language and how we see ourselves using language to describe ourselves is really important. We actually have a whole day in my upcoming women's retreat in November on just language and how the importance of the words that you choose to use to describe yourself and your relationship and your partner influences very heavily how you feel about it. That's why I study language so intensely, and I beat myself up when I use uhs and ums, and I did Toastmasters for many years. Language is really important. This is why you stay in school and study your words. But imagine you don't have to necessarily break up with your partner, but you do need to honor your individuality. Who are you outside of your relationship? Do you need to break up to remember that? No, not necessarily. Some people deliberately do it to themselves because they want to feel the extremes of the breakup. That's fine. That's beautiful. But there are an equal number of people who have the same experience without necessarily breaking up. Retreats are a phenomenal way. Traveling is a phenomenal way. Your partner traveling and leaving you at home is a phenomenal way. Distance is good for a relationship. So, like I said, one of the ways that my partner and I have decided to play with this concept, because we both are studying this now, is by moving away from each other. And I don't even think, I'm recording this podcast, I don't even think he and I have texted today. Whew. So that is, and I know we're thinking about each other, so I'm just wondering, like, who's going to text the other first? All right, so there's mystery, there's play, and really most of that is in my mind. And the way that you see the relationship matters so much. So I remember when I announced this on Instagram, we had some people who were like, wow, this is amazing. And other people are like, how do you not get anxious about what your partner's doing? How do you not get separation anxiety? And then, no one has actually said this, but I have a little part inside of me that loves imagining getting into a fight with someone, but no one has actually said this. But I imagine someone being like, uh-oh, if you need to move away from each other, your relationship's in trouble. That is a fight I made up. It didn't actually happen. I'm kind of bummed that no one has said that to me because I would have gotten to smile sadistically in pleasure at proving them wrong without having to prove them wrong. Anyway, I'm weird. But Press and I get like this weird, twisted, giddy pleasure out of people potentially raising their eyebrows at us when we tell them that we're separated. I remember a few months ago, he and I went to a tango class, and we pretended we didn't know each other the whole time. And I remember I was dancing with another man, and I told him, like, oh, that's my husband over there. And he was like, what? I haven't seen you guys interact at all. I was like, yeah, today we're pretending that we don't know each other. And I remember he raised his eyebrows at me, like, why would you do that? When you're 10 years in, you'll understand. You need to deliberately create mystery, deliberately create new plots regularly if you want to keep your relationship interesting, and to explore new ways of being, to potentially reveal a side of yourself that exists, but your partner may not have seen. We are infinite beings. We're really physical manifestations of God. And so in theory, there is always more to discover. You could do monogamy your whole life with the same person. You still wouldn't know them. No matter how much you studied that person, you will never know them fully. And that's a beautiful thing. It gives us plenty to work with if we're willing to be humble. That's not to say that relationships shouldn't end or that they can't run past their expiration date. Two things can be true at the same time here. But I just want to poke holes in the fallacy that you can totally know someone after being with them for 10 years. You don't. So I'm in my apartment right now, and I just looked around, and it's so nice. I just have like a little cup of tea here. This apartment's actually right next to like a little creek, so hopefully you don't hear too much rushing water, but it's been lovely. I love looking into the rainforest here in Medellin. It's beautiful. And I've gotten to spend a lot of time alone, a lot of alone time meditating, playing music, dancing, stretching, and even doing like self-pleasure practices. It's something I still need to work on. Sorry, my toilet was making a funny noise, and I paused for a moment there. And just committing to filling my cup to overflowing. When I don't have my partner around It forces me to really take good care of myself. It forces me to see how lazy I can be. It forces me to see how messy I can be. When I don't have a partner, or when I have a partner around, it's very easy for me to blame a mess on him when actually it's me. So it's just been wonderful. But another thing that living alone has taught me is how to face inner shit that comes up when I don't have him as a convenient emotional crutch at home. So if something uncomfortable happens, or if I have an uncomfortable emotion, I can't just like go snuggle with him. I have to sit there and feel it or call a friend. And this is what I would do if I were single. And it's very helpful for me to have consciously created a circumstance that would allow me to feel what that is like. So living alone has allowed me to remember who I am and to learn how to re-experience how my aliveness, my turn on, has been here all along as something I entirely create and bring to my partnership. Again, I've recently restarted a self-pleasure practice. I fell off the bandwagon. I'm getting back on. If you want to know kind of where I turn to for these things, I use Foria's products, which are phenomenal. These are great lubricants and products with CBD. They're all natural, organic, and all these things. I use them as lubes. I love them. They are so awesome. I'm putting a link in bio if you ever want to get their products. Yes, it is an affiliate code. Yes, I do get paid. So if you, I do swear by their products, but if you want to purchase them, you are supporting Anxious Love Coach. So thank you. You can also go to I think it's Foria.com or ForiaWellness.com, Foria. If you use Anxious Love Coach 20, you can get 20% off your first purchase. I think that only applies to certain products, not all. I think the bundles are not included. But anyway, thanks for letting me talk about that shameless little plug. So I use that. Some other things that I use are, I use a Chakrub, Chakrub. I'd have no endorsements for their, that's not the word I meant to use. I don't get paid to endorse that, but they are awesome. I have a black onyx crystal wand and it is awesome. I also highly recommend my coach's online courses, Lucy Lamp. She has a course that just came out called Come Together. These are courses for couples. They're also courses for self-pleasuring. If you are wanting to begin on the sensuality and sexuality path, go straight to Lucy Lamp. I also do get a cut of that. So again, if you end up purchasing her products, it will be fun for you. It will be fun for Lucy, and it'll be fun for me because I get a little cut of that as well. So I'll include all of these in the show notes. But these are the things I've been doing during my time alone. I spend a lot of time eating. The sentence that wanted to come was eating delicious food, but a lot of the food in Colombia is not my favorite. So I eat the things that I don't hate, but I enjoy them in the comfort of my apartment. I spend a lot of time working. I spend a lot of time lazing around. When Preston and I FaceTime, it's really fun. It's really cute. It gives us stuff to talk about. And I just really recommend it. Obviously, if you're living in Southern California, it's going to be tricky, especially depending on your income. But here in Colombia, it's totally doable for us. So I'm curious about you. What are some ways that you can start to turn yourself on? But what I also want to mention is that turn on is very much an experience that you cultivate from within. It has a lot more to do with who you become in the present moment. What a lot of people are waiting for is for their partners to turn them on, not realizing that the structure of monogamy, and I'm not saying the answer is open relationships, but it's worth thinking about and taking maybe elements of the mindset of open relationships to create more spice. This is why, by the way, what you desire a partner that other people desire, which is why you probably want your partner to remain desirable, period, especially if your focus on relationship anxiety is focused on lack of attraction. When you know that someone else finds your partner hot, that automatically makes you find your partner more hot. Esther Perel calls this like the third eye effect. This is also why a lot of couples that have had affairs, if they survive, they often end up having a better sex life because the third party activates jealousy, it activates eros. So I'm not saying that betrayal is the answer to re-evoking desire in a long-term relationship. Hell no, that's not what I'm saying. But it's just worth noticing these human patterns. So what most people are doing right now is they're sitting around waiting for their partner to activate them sexually. They're waiting for someone to turn them on through romantic gestures, through sexy music, through love languages. And then maybe when you do get turned on, you perceive that you're being turned on by someone else because they're hot. Okay. And on the surface, yes, maybe. But I have also experienced where no matter how much sexy music you play, no matter how many times my partner takes out the trash, even just being around a hot person, I've experienced times in my life where things that would turn other people on didn't turn me on. And part of that had to do with the fact that I was not open to being awakened. I was not open to being evoked. I was not open to being turned on. And so there's no amount of sexy music or sexy gestures that would turn me on. And so that kind of destroys this idea that it's someone else's job. Now, that said, if you are an alive being, there are circumstances absolutely that can cause us to feel unsafe and turn us off. But I do want to question this idea that kind of like Hollywood and Disney makes us think that if you just see the right person, if you're with the right person, they're just going to automatically turn you on just by their sheer existence. That is not true. Seduction is very much a game. And turn on and aliveness is a skill that you have to build like anything else. And it has a little bit to do with your partner, but more often than not, it has less to do with your partner than you think. So curious about you, what in the past has turned you on? Feel free to just head to my Instagram and say, hey, I listened to your podcast. These are some things that have turned me on. Here's things that my partner does that turn me on. Here's ways that I turn myself on. I have a couple posts back on ways that you can turn yourself on. A lot of them is like making sure that you are staying as physically fit as possible. Obviously, some people are going to think that's ableist. I think work with what you got, use it or lose it. Eat as healthy as you can. Take care of your body. Take care of your mind. A lot of these things we've forgotten. You know, imagine if you were a tiger. Eat the tiger diet. Do things that tigers should do. We are animals. Treat yourself as best you can, and be practicing a lot of activities that stoke the fire from within. Breath work, meditation, noticing and activating and processing your big emotions is a big one as well. If you have traumas, who doesn't? If you have traumas, do your best to start to clear them out through somatic processes and EMDR and IFS therapy. Can work with, Sheridan is amazing. I haven't been taking one-on-one clients lately, but our programs do a lot of trauma release techniques. And really, trauma is such a hot topic right now and can prevent us from feeling alive. So these are just a bunch of things that have popped up off the top of my head to start to help you feel more turned on. So I was saying that, just to get back on topic, that traditionally we're expecting our partners or other people to do the dirty work of having to make us feel alive through, again, putting on sexy music and love languages and romantic gestures. And while these things can certainly evoke and contribute to a turn on, they don't necessarily cause it. Because like I said, you have to be open to being turned on, and that is a state of being. That is a state of receptivity. Turn on has a lot more to do with who you decide to be in response to the present moment. When you find yourself turned on by another person, is it really the other person turning you on, or does that person just bring a side of you out that you haven't seen? Some of the people I've found myself most turned on by are people who have activated long lost parts of myself, and that has been really useful information. Maybe someone makes me feel really intelligent, maybe someone makes me, or maybe they for a moment see me as I would love to see myself, as someone very intelligent, as someone very wise, as someone very caring and warm. Maybe someone thinks I'm ecstatically hilarious. Maybe someone thinks I'm seductive. And who knows? Really, the way that other people see us impacts how we see ourselves. We're projecting beings. And so when someone sees us the way that we would love to see ourselves, we happen to find them attractive because they affirm to us the very way that we hunger to affirm to ourselves who we are. So notice how your turn on manifests, not just in the more obvious ways like a wet pussy or a hard cock, but maybe we can start to notice turn on happening in the subtle ways. Just right now, I'm touching my mug, which is a little bit warm, and I'm receiving that warmth into my palms. Ooh, what does that do to my body? Does it make me want to swirl and undulate my spine? Notice if you have an impulse to sit up a little straighter. And yes, it can go all the way to having a really magnetic wet pussy and just like squirming in your seat from being around someone that really activates you. So there are so many ways to start to experience turn on. And really, so much of it ties down to remembering who you are, that this might scare you, may or may not have to do with your partner. I used to believe that, I'm going to trigger so many people with this. Oh my God. I used to believe that your partner is the only person that should turn you on. And I think that in closing yourself off to being allowed to be turned on by other things, not even people, I can get turned on by an orchid, you guys. You're played with some flowers and nature. I mean, nature is one of the most erotic things if you slow down enough to be with it. The way that wind can caress your face, the way that the sun can touch you in the heart, the way that an orchid can brush against your index finger as you play with the inside of it. Okay, nature is very erotic, and humans are nature. And so we can have a primary commitment to our partners and have agreements to do monogamy in however you decide to define that. But I think in closing ourselves off to never allow ourselves to be turned on by an experience that isn't our partner, I think what we're doing is it's kind of like we're taking, I use this analogy in my online course, Both Feet In, which by the way is going to be available very shortly. I talked about this in Both Feet In. It's like a shower head. And there's all these opportunities and little holes that the water comes out of, and the water is the life force energy. And what we're often doing is like plugging up these holes, trying to make sure that we never feel anything for anyone or anything outside of our partner. And our life force gets trampled. And in trampling down our life force with our ability to connect with others, we might be trampling down our life force that's also available to our partners. So like I said, it's one thing to act on desire. It's another thing to shut it down completely in the name of making sure that we don't act on it. And that's a tall order. To play that edge in a relationship is a tall order. How do I remain faithful to the agreements of my partnership without totally shutting myself down to the point where I can't get turned on, period, with or without my partner? I spent so many years turned off because I didn't want to get turned on and not wield that turn on responsibly. And so that's why another piece of this is really building self-trust. You have to trust that you will be okay no matter what happens to you. You have to trust that you'll be okay no matter what your partner does. You have to trust you'll be okay no matter what you decide with your partner. So in order to, you've heard that quote that says, if you love someone, let them go. If they come back, they're yours. If they don't come back, they were never yours to begin with. I still believe, of course, I leave room for other contexts to exist, but I still believe that to be true. When we allow our partners to be separate beings outside of us, and we allow ourselves to be separate beings outside of them, and we allow ourselves to interact in potentially an erotic way with the world, again, you get to define the rules that you want. But again, as Esther Perel might say, know that there is a thrill of the transgression. So you just want to factor that in and understand that where there are rules, there will be a desire to break them. That doesn't mean anything but what you want it to mean. So can you allow your partner to be an erotic being? will you allow yourself to be an erotic being, free of shame? And one of the ways to do this is to continue to hold the mindset, even if you follow through on your commitments and your agreements in the relationship. Can you have the mindset of being someone who is not defined by your relationship? So, as you listen to this, I wonder if it activates you, if it triggers you, if it scares you. If it does, that makes so much sense. I'm just sharing from what's been true for me over the last 6 months. In really, on the outside, my relationship with Preston looks exactly the same. On the inside, the conversations that are happening and the vulnerability and the revealing of other sides of ourselves has made this relationship a lot more interesting and dare I say, very hot. So some of you guys are listening to this and you're maybe thinking, okay, I think I might feel somewhat ready to explore my individuality within partnership. Maybe that's going to look like me traveling for a couple months. Maybe that's going to look like me going on Natalie's retreat, Aliveness from Within. Link in show notes. Maybe that's going to look like me going back to school. Like, what would you do if you were single? Go do that. And I don't just mean like hook up with a bunch of people, although for some it might look like that. But I do think that, all paths lead to the same place. And we should still be willing to explore. So as you start to explore your individuality, and maybe you go to your partner today and you say, Natalie and Preston, they got 2 separate places to live and I want to do that. That'd be really fun. And maybe they respond with protest, and maybe there is some anxiety that comes up. Just know that a lot of times anxiety is a masquerade. It's a cover for grief and loss. And even if you stay in the relationship, there will be phases of the relationship that will pass, that will die. And as we make space for new desires, new wantings, old dynamics of the partnership will die. And with that comes loss and grief and sadness. So just make sure you leave room for that. And loneliness as well. If you are going to be consciously cultivating, maintaining a sense of separateness, and as Om Rapani says in his book, Prerequisites to Ecstasy, not only maintaining separateness, but maintaining yourself as an attractive shore to visit, right? Doesn't if you maintain a separateness, a sense of separateness, but you don't keep yourself up and you're otherwise a miserable person and you're and visiting you feels like poison, then there's no point to the separateness. You want separateness, but you also want to be an attractive shore to come visit. Both of you do. I remember in the years past when my relationship was kind of on the rocks and my relationship anxiety was really bad. We were both really cozy, but we'd also gotten really sloppy. We never dressed up. We'd gotten really comfortable. And so even as we started to create a sense of separateness, we remained sloppy. And so there was not much desire to be had. So you need that too. Just know that. As you do this, you might start to experience a little bit of separation anxiety. Arguably, I think that all anxiety is a sense of separation anxiety. It's the separation of life circumstances. We might move from one life circumstance to another life circumstance. And that means endings. So if you want to have aliveness in your relationship, both with yourself and with your partner, make room for endings, make room for loss, make room for loneliness, and know that embedded in the death of things, there is also life and awakenings and newness. So really, I think that the art of stoking the fire from within, it's been long lost in a world that demands you to look outside of yourself for your aliveness. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about my upcoming women's retreat this November. I'm going to be hosting a women's retreat with exactly this. Aliveness from Within is a women's retreat for cultivating self-trust and eros within committed partnership. You don't need to be in a partnership, but it's happening relatively near Sequoia National Park in California, Hot Springs, California, at Vedanta Spiritual and Holistic Retreat from November 8th to 13th, 2022. And so this is going to be 5 days of learning a lot of things. I'm going to be first and foremost saying, while we're here, we are technically cultivating the mindset of singlehood. Like, yes, we will be reflecting on the partnership, but overall, this time would be for you. So if you are a woman listening to this, and you are in partnership or you're not, and you are wanting to learn how to, first and foremost, understand what's going on if you're experiencing relationship anxiety, especially if you are experiencing the flavor of relationship anxiety that stems from lack of attraction. That was my first experience of relationship anxiety. I've had many other experiences of relationship anxiety, sometimes opposite to that, where I'm wondering if my partner is attracted to me. They all kind of stem from the same places of insecurity, and we're going to address both of those places. But if you relate to my journey of like, I'm not feeling attracted to my partner, I don't feel alive, I feel dead inside, I don't want to have sex, I don't feel desire, I'm talking to you. So if you are finding yourself frustrated because your partner isn't turning you on, number one, it's not your fault, and two, there is something you can do about it, right? Those two things are true at the same time, as two things often are true at the same time. So I want to teach you how to access that passion from within rather than outsourcing it to your partner. Your partner, like I said, can contribute to your turn on, but they are not responsible for it. There's a difference. I'm going to teach you how to inspire and evoke your current or your future partner's divine attention, their devotion, their presence. A lot of it has to do with you being in your pleasure. When a woman is deeply in her pleasure, it's very hard to resist and not notice her. So we need to remember this long lost art of being the seductress. First and foremost for yourself, and remembering who the F you are. And, if you want the kind of love where your partner just their jaw drops to the floor in awe and adoration for you, this has less to do with your appearance and a lot more to do with your energy and what's going on inside. Sometimes the times when my partner has found me the most beautiful, yes, have been when I have a full face of makeup and a perfect outfit. That certainly helps. But a lot of it often also has to do with when my energy is magnetic, and I could have a messy bun and still get that level of attention. You're going to become more comfortable having difficult conversations about relationships, which is going to increase your intimacy and your desire. And can we do that while maintaining a sense of safety, right? So the answer to re-evoking desire and lust for your partner, especially if you've been with them for a long time, it's not necessarily to open up the relationship, although it can. Omrupani, in his book Prerequisites to Ecstasy, say there's a big difference between going from a bad relationship to a good relationship and a good relationship to a great relationship. I would not suggest using an open relationship to fix a relationship that is not good. That is a recipe for disaster. But we can take the principles, the mindset, the appreciation of the idea of an open relationship to spice up some interesting conversations. Without having to change a thing that we necessarily do on the outside of the relationship, but we can change the internal dynamic. I'm hopeful also that you can gain some clarity on your existing or your past partnerships if you're finding that you're not sure whether you want to be with your partner or not. It's very hard to make a decision while you're in a state of fight or flight or operating out of trauma. In my case, that's what was going on for many years in my relationship. I had one foot out the door and I thought it was only attraction-based, and sure, that was part of it. But a lot of it too is my fear of commitment. We are going to cover this. In the first few days, we're mostly covering how to feel safe in your body. This is about creating containment and safety. And we are going to be processing some old emotions from your past and your history that make it hard for you to see your relationship clearly. But once you can see yourself and your relationship clearly, making a decision is so much easier because you're not focused on making the right or the wrong decision. You're just focused on making a decision and then working with the emotions that come around it. I'm hopeful also that we can toss out some outdated beliefs on love and desire. The way we can do this is I'm hopeful just by talking to each other and normalizing a lot of what long-term relationships go through, so that when you are not feeling attracted to your partner, or maybe even they're not feeling attracted to you, you can A, know how to fix that, and B, not be panicking and freaking out. And that really has to do with building self-trust, which is why that's one of the pillars to maintaining an erotic connection is you need to be okay with potentially losing everything. And that's not easy, but I'm going to teach you a lot of skills that can get you closer to that. Do I think that people can just fully trust themselves? Maybe a moment at a time. And we can have more moments where more of us is on board with trusting ourselves. I think that's why we call it a practice. So, and then last and not least, a lot of this learning how to evoke desire is understanding polarity, which, by the way, is connected to being separate. Being separate means being opposite. Opposite means contrast. That means we need to have opposite energies. We're going to be using words like masculine and feminine to describe these opposites, but just know that those are just words that point to energies. Some people prefer the words yin and yang. There's a penetrative energy, there's a receptive energy. And once you understand this, you can understand nature. Once you understand nature, you can understand sexual energy. So we're going to be talking about all these things. I'm so excited. So if you are interested, I just spent a good chunk of time talking about aliveness from within. If you are in California, I'm hopeful that this will be an easy trip for you. If you are in the United States, this will be a trek. And if you are outside of the US, an even bigger trek for you. So how bad do you want it? That is the question. So if you are interested, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to enroll. I put a ton of information on the retreat webpage that can help you to make a decision. I'm hopeful that in listening to this podcast as well, you've gotten an idea of what we're going to be covering. But if there is anything else that is making you not totally sure, or if there's something I didn't address, by the way, if there's something I didn't address, I want to know what that is. So please reach out to me, send me an email, or shoot me a DM over Instagram. Just say I have a question about the retreat, and I'd be happy to help you make a decision. I do have some payment plan options. We do have a few months left, so there's still time. But if you want to break up your payments, we do have that option right now, as we have 3 months left. So excuse me, I had a little burp there. I'm going to close up this, I want to say lecture, but it's actually a podcast, and answer a few questions that I saw posted on Instagram just right before this podcast episode. I said, do you have questions about separateness? I'm going to take a few minutes just to answer some of those before we wrap it up. All right. On welcoming separateness as an anxious partner. How do you welcome separateness if you tend to identify as anxiously attached? All right, so I have 3 answers to this that come up immediately. Number 1, I would say go find your inner child. If you have an abandonment wound, if your dad left you or someone left you when you were younger, whether that was literally physically abandoning you or emotionally abandoning you, I recommend finding some kind of trauma specialist or inner child specialist or IFS practitioner that can help you work with the feelings of abandonment, which, by the way, from a nonviolent communication perspective, abandonment is not I don't see abandonment as an emotion. I see abandonment as an event that triggers emotions like loneliness and sadness. And there's really, abandonment is like the thing that happened. But if we take the circumstances out for a moment, we might have just pain and sadness and loneliness, grief. So working with your inner child is one. Number 2, I would see if you can shift from anxiety, because anxiety usually comes with a transition or some kind of separation. I would shift from seeing if you can find your resistance to experiencing grief and the void inside. So if the partner is leaving to go live their lives without you, temporarily, potentially, see if you can feel into the grief. We love them and now they're leaving. Ouch. And let that help you enter the void inside. There can actually be an enormous pleasure in the void if you're willing to go there. I was just in it yesterday, actually. And then this is going to be a little tough love. Go get a life. Don't always be available. Give your partner a chance to want you too. I think 2 words that are very useful for me are the words of course. Of course. Just like everything, there's a law out there
sentence is not flowing smoothly. Life is impermanence. This is a Buddhist principle. Life is impermanence. Things end. Of course. And these two words, of course, when someone leaves us, of course. I don't mean that as like I deserve to be abandoned kind of mindset. No, it's just that things end and people leave and people die and things end. Of course, that is the law of nature, that things end. When you get money, you end up spending it. When you buy something, it breaks. When you enter a relationship, it ends. When you start life, life ends. Everything is impermanent. When something leaves you, or someone leaves you, to have the humility to recognize that we were never entitled to have these things forever. Drop your chin to your head, to your chest. Of course. Of course this would end. Of course our time together would end. Let that be a practice for you. It's been very valuable for me. So if you tend to identify as an anxious attached partner, I would say those would be some good place to start. Is it okay to not want large amounts of separateness? Of course it's okay to not want large amounts of separateness. Just know that separateness is what allows you to desire your partner. So maybe you're one of those people who really just desires safety and coziness. If that's you, notice if you can do that without the expense of the missing and wanting each other. It's very hard to miss someone if they're with you all the time. I'm seeing, did I miss something? Are you guys living apart? Kind of, yes. I think this is a good place to stop. So hopefully, I mean, that main question is like, what do I do with the anxiety that comes up when we create separateness? Those answers that I just gave are going to answer probably 50-70% of a lot of the questions that you guys asked on Instagram. So I hope that you found that to be helpful. Just to recap, if you are interested in Aliveness from Within, the women's retreat for cultivating self-trust and eros within committed partnership from November 8th to 13th, 2022, this fall in California, Hot Springs, California, take a look at the link in the show notes. I'm also going to link Lucy Lamp's programs if you are interested in activating your aliveness and sexuality and sensuality as a practice and self-pleasure and all that stuff. So juicy. Again, I get a cut out of that. Yummy, yummy. Thank you, thank you. I'm also going to put links to Foria Wellness if you want to purchase some products for your self-pleasure practice. So Lucy Lamp's products and Foria's products in tandem together can be super, super yummy. So all that's going to be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's very near and dear to my heart and really representative of Anxious Love Coach 2.0, which is all about eros and aliveness. So enjoy this. I hope you enjoy this, I guess I should say. And I can't wait to catch you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye. If you love Anxious Love Coach, please leave us a review. Every month, I will be choosing one review, posting the username on my Instagram page, and offering that person a personalized voice message response to any question of their choice via private message. Thanks for listening to the Anxious Love Coach today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Please also subscribe to my email list at anxiouslovecoach.com as I'm trying to reduce my reliance on social media. In exchange, you'll receive my free relationship anxiety meditation and a ton of information that I won't share to the general public about my personal challenges and learnings within relationship. If you would like to work with me and or my co-coach, head on over to my website and click Start Here. Thanks for listening and catch you in the next episode.